the bonnet. Why would anyone spend time and money making it go faster?
I can manage a clutch quite well
Well, because
now, but
Sybil
I
Lupp
didn't
isn't
like to allow
just
for that.
anyone. Sybil, why did you modify the E-Type?
Quite a few people have asked that. Even the factory wanted to know, why do I want to modify a 150-mile-an-hour car? And I think really to make it more exciting, do something different with it.
This was certainly different, roaring around Manfield Raceway with a septuagenarian speedster as she took her baby for a nostalgic spin.
And then I thought, well, what can I do now? Jaguar aren't making anything for me to drive. I'll modify it again. Then I put 6 twin-choke Webers on it, which means that I've got 1 carburettor for each cylinder.
What's the fastest speed you've ever driven at?
I'd rather not say because it was... I'd rather not say. It's better not spoken about.
Why?
Well, the fastest speed I've travelled at that was timed was in my E-Type Jaguar, my 1962 E-Type Jaguar, with all the factory special equipment on it, and that was timed in one direction on a Hakea airstrip at 170, slightly over 170 miles per hour.
What about on the open road, though? Because you go out when there's nobody on the road and you've got it all to yourself.
But I can be charged for exceeding the speed limit if I mention what I travel at. A lot of people do far exceed the speed limit, and I know I do too. And I have actually lost my licence for a month racing or driving at speeds that may have been dangerous to the public and racing on the highway. No, some motorcyclists came up behind me, sat behind for a little while, and then suddenly decided to blow me off. I was travelling at 85 miles an hour, which I thought was reasonable. We were the only people on the straight road. There's nothing else there, only tussocks and desert. And they blew me off, you see, and I thought, well, I can do it better than you, so I pulled up, dropped back a bit and charged them. They spread out 4 across the road and pushed me into the rough. And I thought, that's all right, I can get through on the rough, so I went through on the rough. I don't really know quite how fast I was going, but it was well over the 100 miles per hour. Fell up, smothered them with stones and straight into the cop.
I'm having a good time, me. Please don't blame me. Oh, I'm knocking myself
A Marlborough
out.
farmer's daughter who thrived on the smell of exhaust fumes, Sybil was always ahead of her time and sometimes ahead of the law. Her first car, acquired and driven before she held a licence, was an MGM, similar to this MGPA. Not the most user-friendly of vintage cars, but we ventured out onto the Wellington waterfront for a trip down memory lane.
Look at the Malaruba than the steering wheel.
Like a Dodgem car.
Yes, it really is. It's like a Dodger. But it's fun, just to say.
So how does this compare with the one that you had?
Very similar, only my brakes were much better.
Yeah.
The steering on mine was much better too. Otherwise, it's very similar. The suspension feels much the same.
Except you used to go a bit faster in
Oh
yours.
yes, definitely. Flat out. I loved mechanical things. Anything that had wheels on it was exciting.
Do you think cars were in your blood?
Definitely, because my father had a fast car. And I always had a fast car. As a kid, I could remember him egging him on when I was a 3-year-old to go faster. And I just loved fast cars and fast horses, both.
How did your father, though, teach you and your brother to drive in a racing line?
Mainly because he drove fast himself, and he said if you drive fast you must make sure you do it carefully, that you don't cause accidents to other people and yourself. And before either of us got licences, he had a course marked out in the paddock on the grass, which was very slippery, and we had to drive through that without touching the pegs and under a watch, so we had to do it smartly.
The rush of beating the clock was hit, but for Sybil this exhilaration wasn't confined to mere speed. It included the nuts and bolts under the bonnet. Parental advice to take up nursing was put on the back burner, and still a teenager, she drove out those farm gates and never looked back. First job, convince a Nelson garage owner she knew her mechanical onions.
And he sent me down to the workshop. He said, go down there and talk to the boys, don't just sit there or stand there. He said, look at them and talk to them. And I knew what they were doing. You see, I could talk to them about their jobs, and I did talk. I'm a chitter-chatter anyway. And he said, come back in about 20 minutes, which I did. And he said, well, I'll go down and talk to them. He said, I won't push a girl in amongst them, but if they're willing to give you a go, I'll give you a go. And he came back and said, you can start tomorrow. And I was off. And that was it. I never looked back.
Did you think of yourself in those days as a bit of a rebel, a rule breaker?
No. I thought of it as somebody who really loved what they were doing. And if you love it, you'll do it well.
How did the men treat you in the garage?
Fantastic. They were just lovely. Nobody ever pushed me down. I thought it was just wonderful of them. And I noticed a big change when later in the business employed apprenticed girls, especially the last ones well into the 70s. The men took no notice of the girls battling with an exhaust system. They said, well, you reckon you're equal, do it yourself. That never happened to me. They automatically came to help me. I never struggled with anything without one of the boys jumping up to come and help. And that followed me right through my life.
A life of single-mindedness, but not without hardship. Widowed with 2 small children, Sybil remarried after the war and managed to save enough capital with her new husband to start a business in Dunedin. It was 1947 and High Performance Cars was born. You started a business and it was very successful right from the start. You only had to place one advertisement.
Yes, just once. And then I had more work than I could do. And I raced my car, which was the best advertising I could think of doing. I was so full of self-confidence, you know, it was ridiculous. I thought, only I can get out there and drive my MG, I'll beat them. I'm sure I will. And it did.
Burning rubber and flying gravel. That's Sybil there, hooning it up the mountain with 2 elegant white straps across the bonnet of the MG, the hill climb being her specialty. In the 1940s, the Lupp Travelling Road Show was a familiar sight at local race gymkhanas and Grand Prix. Sybil became quite a celebrity, with fastest lap times of records shattered. They were halcyon days, quite literally the roaring 40s. The thrill of competing and winning, the camaraderie and the constant attention ensured Sybil a place among the motorsport fraternity, to the chagrin of the occasional male.
There was an XK120 running there, the first we'd had out in competition in New Zealand, and everybody expected it to win, and I expected it to win too. But I beat it by a fraction of time. Somewhere there's a report of the Times. And when I was given the prize at the end of the day, they said, oh, congratulations for beating the Jaguar, the fastest car here. I said, I didn't beat the Jaguar, I beat the driver. And he was behind me and he said, you stuck-up little bitch.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh,
I didn't mean to hurt him, but that probably was the wrong thing to say with him right behind me. But it happened.
22 MGs and numerous trophies later, it was time to move on. Sybil's racing passion was now to be ignited by a different flame, the Jaguar. For Sybil, Jaguar would come to represent all that was special and challenging in a motor car. And on the racetrack, Sybil and her Jags were an awesome combination. In 1950, high-performance cars became Jaguar service, and Sybil was well and truly the grande dame of the local Jaguar scene. Her expertise became legendary, and she was flown up and down the country to attend to troublesome cats. With her third husband, Lionel Archer, she renamed the business and based it in Wellington.
With the setup as received, they're taking vacuum from only 2 Venturas for the brakes. 1 PSP.
Lionel and Sybil may now be retired, but Archer and Lupp Services lives on. Looking at the photos of you in the early days, it's obvious that you did retain a lot of femininity. I mean, you looked very stylish in those cars.
Yes, I tried to maintain that right up until, well, all the time practically. I dressed fairly smartly. when I was working for Sir Geoffrey Scoons, the British High Commissioner here, he said, I want to ask you a question. And my wife says it's rude, I'm not to, but I'm going to. He said, what do you do with your skirts when you get into your overalls? And I said, I've still got them on, I just push them down inside. I said they're the new material that doesn't crease so badly. He really wanted to know what I'd done with my skirts.
The racing days are long gone, as are the rigours of running a family business. But Sybil is not exactly idle. As often as time and health permits, she's an aide at the Mary Potter Hospice, nursing, helping with patients, taking time out for a chat, even sharing a prayer or two. Like patients at the hospice, Sybil is fighting a lengthy battle with disease. Over 20 years ago, she developed rheumatoid arthritis and has since undergone several operations to restore her twisted joints. You won't find Sybil here to swap sob stories. She's more likely to be discussing twin carbs or modified suspension. She expects the dying to make the most of living and makes no apologies for that. As for her own struggle, it's just got to be lived with, no matter how much the hindrance to an old lady in a hurry.
It has frustrated me terribly. I take too long to do everything. I've had a great deal of pain for the last 26 years. But the medical profession has been completely wonderful. I mean, I was prepared to face the surgery and they were prepared to do it. And I've had a foot rebuild, which enabled me to use a clutch car again. Metal pieces in my foot. I've got plastic joints in my hand. I've got bones in my wrist from the bone bank. And I can do most things now within limit. But I have to be careful how I use the rebuilt parts or they could break again. E-type windows were very heavy to wind up, 2 hands. I had to stop the car to wind up the windows. And I had to stop the car to operate the rocker switches because my fingers were not strong enough to operate them. I couldn't raise the hood because it was too heavy for me, and that was the result of arthritis.
And that was the end of owning E-types for Sybil.
Now, normally when somebody gets into their mid-70s with a body crippled with arthritis, they think of slowing down. But not Sybil. At age 74, she not only retains her love of mechanical tinkering, she's landed herself a Le Mans XJS Jag, the fastest, sleekest cat around.
Offered to her at special discount from Jaguar, the XJS is built both for comfort and for speed. The knobs, buttons and switches are more manageable for less than agile fingers. And even better, there's apparently room for improvement under the bonnet.
It'll be a long time before, I'm sure, but it should do 150 miles per hour if circumstances were suitable. And it might go faster than that if I made modifications to the engine in similar lines to what I did to the V12 E-type. And I would like to remove a whole lot of the air cleaners and all this and put a modified induction system onto it that works with the fuel injection, which has a beautiful looking plenum chamber up top, all polished with air vents facing to the front. And one of those would give it approximately another 40 horsepower. I don't know whether I'll ever actually reach that stage, but because I'm getting pretty old, but I like to think I would do it. It's something to look forward to. You've got to look forward all the time, not backwards.
What happens to Sybil Lupp when you can no longer get a licence, you're no longer allowed to drive? What will happen to you then?
I don't even think about it. I think it will never happen. Definitely never happen.
So you'll be burning up the highway until the day you die?
I think so. I hope so. Why not?